I arrived at the hotel where my son's engagement dinner was being held. Just as I walked in, I heard the bride mutter with pure contempt while looking right at me. "The stinking peasant has arrived." Those words hit me like a punch in the gut. I swallowed hard and felt the blood rushing to my face. I instinctively turned around to leave that place immediately. But before I could take the first step, my son Daniel grabbed my arm firmly and leaned in close to my ear. What he whispered changed everything. "Stay calm, Dad. Tomorrow is our revenge." In that instant, I knew something much bigger was happening, something I had not seen coming. But before I tell you what happened next, let me introduce myself. I need you to understand who I am and where I come from, so you can understand why those words hurt me so much, and why what we did later was necessary. My name is Arthur Miller. I'm 63 years old. I was born and raised on a small ranch on the outskirts of Montana. My father was a rancher like his father before him, and like I ended up being too. I grew up among the land, the crops, the cattle, and the hard seasons. I learned from a young age that honest work, even if it is hard, is what builds a man's character. My hands have calluses that tell stories of decades of plowing, sowing, and harvesting under the relentless sun. I do not come from money, but I do not come from misery either. My family always had enough. A decent house food on the table, clean clothes, and most importantly, values. My father taught me that a man is worth his word, not what he has in the bank. That dignity is not for sale. That respect is earned with actions, not with last names. When I was 25, I married Rose. She was the most beautiful and kind woman I have ever met in my life. We got married in the town church with a modest party full of joy. We had 2 children, Daniel and Mary. We raised our children with the same values that were taught to me: hard work, honesty, humility, and respect for others, no matter where they came from. Rose passed away 6 years ago from a heart condition that we could not detect in time. It was fast, painful, and devastating. But life goes on even if you do not want it to. And I was left with our children, who were already adults by then. Mary got married 3 years ago to a good man, a high school teacher. They live in Chicago and have a beautiful baby girl who is my adoration. We visit each other often. She never forgot where she came from. Daniel, my son, is 32 years old. He is an agricultural engineer. He studied at the state university with a scholarship he got for his good grades. I was so proud. Seeing him graduate was one of the happiest days of my life, after Rose, of course. Daniel was always hardworking, intelligent, and respectful. He worked for years advising ranchers and agricultural companies on farming techniques, efficient irrigation, and sustainability. He was doing well. He was not rich, but he lived comfortably, and always he kept in touch with me. He came to the ranch every week. He helped me with the chores. We shared beers on the porch while watching the sunset. A year and a half ago, Daniel met a woman named Vanessa Sterling. He introduced her to me at a family lunch. She was pretty well groomed, with that air of someone who is used to fine things. She came from the city. Her family, according to Daniel, had export businesses. Money people, I thought when I met her. But I tried not to judge. My son was in love, and that was what mattered. From the beginning, something about Vanessa did not quite sit right with me. It was not that she was impolite or rude, but there was something in the way she looked at me as if she were evaluating me, measuring my worth, and finding me insufficient. When Daniel told me they were going to get married, I congratulated him with all my heart. Son, if she makes you happy, I am happy. But inside I had a knot in my stomach that would not go away. Vanessa's parents were Stephen Sterling and Patricia Sterling, a man of about 60, well-dressed with that air of superiority that only money gives, and she was an elegant woman with refined speech, who smiled but whose eyes were cold as ice. The first time I went to their house in the city, I felt out of place. It was a huge residence in a neighborhood that looked like it was from a movie, with gardens kept by professional landscapers, furniture that looked like it was taken from a magazine, and a silence that was not peace, but distance. Stephen shook my hand reluctantly. Nice to meet you, Arthur. Daniel has spoken a lot about you. But his tone said the opposite. It said I know exactly who you are and you do not impress me. Patricia was even worse. She offered me coffee in a cup so delicate I was afraid of breaking it, and throughout the conversation she asked me questions that sounded innocent, but clearly sought to confirm what she already thought of me. And have you always lived on the ranch, Arthur? Yes, ma'am, all my life. How interesting. And do you have other businesses besides agriculture? No, ma'am, just the ranch. It is what I know how to do. Oh, sure. How noble. The work of the land. Noble. The word fell on me like an insult disguised as a compliment, but I swallowed my pride for my son. Because he was happy. Because I did not want to be the father who ruins his son's relationship over unfounded suspicions. Months passed. The wedding preparations moved forward. I helped with what I could. Daniel told me not to worry about the expenses, that Vanessa's family was covering almost everything. They insisted Dad, but I put in my share too. I gave him what I had saved. It was not much, but it was honest. Money earned with the sweat of my brow. And then came the engagement dinner. 1 week before the wedding, at an elegant hotel in the city, with more than 50 guests. Family from both sides, friends, colleagues of Daniel and me, the father of the groom, arriving directly from the ranch after a day of work. I had showered. I had put on my best shirt, dress pants that I only used for special occasions. I had combed my hair with care, but I was still me, a 63-year-old man with calloused hands and clean but old boots. And when I entered the hotel ballroom, looking for my son among the elegant people, I heard her voice. Vanessa's voice. The stinking peasant has arrived. She did not scream it. She said it in a murmur, to her mother who was by her side, but loud enough for me to hear it, for several people around to hear it. My breath cut short. I felt the room spinning, like all eyes were turning towards me, some with pity, others with discomfort, some with barely disguised amusement. I turned to leave, to get out of there, to not ruin my son's night. But Daniel appeared out of nowhere. He took my arm firmly, and instead of letting me go, he pulled me close to him. Stay calm, Dad, he whispered in my ear. Tomorrow is our revenge. I looked at him confused. What? Trust me, please. Endure this night. I will explain everything to you later. There was something in his eyes. Something hard. Something determined. Something I had not seen before in my son. I nodded. I did not understand anything, but I trusted him. Daniel took me to a table. He introduced me to some of his engineer friends, educated people who treated me with genuine respect. We talked about agriculture, irrigation techniques, and sustainability. They made me feel included, valued. But throughout the dinner, I could not stop looking at the main table where Vanessa was sitting with her parents, laughing, toasting, as if nothing had happened, as if she had not insulted me minutes before. And Stephen looked at me from time to time, with that smile that did not reach his eyes, as if saying, You know your place, peasant. After dinner, when most of the guests had left, Daniel asked me to accompany him to his car. We got in. He closed the doors, and he looked at me with a seriousness that scared me. Dad, I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen to me until the end without interrupting. What is wrong, son? He took out his phone. He opened an audio recording app, and he showed me a list of files. There were more than 20. What is this? Recordings of Vanessa, of her parents, of conversations they had when they thought I was not listening. My stomach turned. Daniel, what did you do? 3 weeks ago, I started to suspect. Vanessa started asking strange questions about the ranch, about if it was in your name, about if you had a will, about how much it could be worth. At first I thought it was normal curiosity, but then she started to push, to say that after we got married we should convince you to put the ranch in my name. To protect it, she said, so there are no legal problems later. Son, wait. There is more. One night I was at her house in the living room when I heard voices in Stephen's study. The door was ajar, and I heard Vanessa talking to her parents. About me, about you, about the ranch? Daniel pressed play on one of the recordings. Vanessa's voice sounded clear without the sweet tone she used with me. Almost there, Mom. Only 2 weeks left until the wedding. Afterward, I convinced Daniel to talk to his father. The old man is stupid. He will sign whatever his son asks him to. Patricia's voice responded. And if he does not sign? Then we use Plan B. Daniel already gave me access to his accounts. He has savings. Not much, but enough. And once we are married, everything is community property. I can move it however I want. Stephen's voice was heard then. The ranch is the important thing. That land is right in the zone they are going to develop. The government already approved the highway. In 2 years, that land is going to be worth 10 times more. We need that ranch. I know Dad. That is why I married him. Do you think I liked going to that dirty town, pretending I liked his peasant father? But it will be worth it. The phone fell from my hands. Daniel picked it up. He looked at me with eyes full of pain and rage. There are more recordings, Dad. Worse ones. Talking about how they plan to manipulate me, about how they plan to get you out of the ranch, about how they are going to split the money when they sell the land. I could not speak. I could only feel how everything I thought I knew was crumbling. That is why I asked you to endure tonight, Daniel continued, because tomorrow, at the wedding, I am going to expose everything in front of everyone. I have the recordings. I have videos too. I recorded them when I went back to their house with a hidden camera. I have proof of everything. My God. The wedding is the day after tomorrow. I know. It is already paid for. The venue, the food, the music, everything. But I am not going to marry that snake, and I am not going to let her get away with it. I am going to expose who they really are, in front of her family, in front of her friends, in front of everyone. I looked him in the eyes. I saw the child I raised, but I also saw the man he had become. A man who was not going to allow himself to be used, who was not going to allow his father to be humiliated. Are you sure about this? Completely. It is going to be a scandal. Let it be. I prefer a scandal than a life tied to a lie. I hugged him, hard, like when he was a child and had nightmares. I am proud of you, son. Thank you, Dad. But I need you to help me. I need you to stay calm tomorrow at the wedding. Do not react no matter what you see, because everything is going to go according to plan. What plan? He smiled. It was a smile that reminded me of his mother. You will see. That night I did not sleep. I stayed in my hotel room, turning everything over in my mind. Vanessa's words, the recordings, Daniel's plan. Part of me wanted to convince him to cancel the wedding, and that is it. To walk away, to not stoop to their level. But another part, the part that still felt the burn of those words, the stinking peasant, wanted justice. I wanted them to pay. The next morning, Daniel called me early. Dad, can you come to my apartment? There is someone I want you to meet. I arrived an hour later. In the apartment were Daniel and another man, a guy about 40 with glasses, casual clothes, a laptop open on the table. Dad, this is Jason. He is an audio-visual technician. He is going to help us with the presentation tomorrow. Jason shook my hand. Nice to meet you, Arthur. Daniel explained everything to me. What we are going to do is set up a projection system in the hall. During the ceremony, right before the vows, we are going to project the recordings and videos on a big screen, all coordinated. And the venue allows it. I already talked to the venue manager, said Daniel. I explained that I wanted to make a special presentation for Vanessa. I paid him extra. He suspects nothing. And her? She knows nothing. She thinks everything is going according to plan. This morning she texted me all excited, saying she cannot wait to be my wife. The contempt in his voice was palpable. Jason showed me how everything was going to work. The edited recordings, the videos with subtitles, so everyone clearly understood what was being said. The exact timing. It is going to be like a bomb, said Jason, but a well-placed bomb. I left that apartment with a mixture of anticipation and nervousness. This was going to change everything, not just for Daniel and Vanessa, but for our family, for her family. for everyone who was going to be at that wedding. The wedding day arrived faster than I expected. I put on my best suit, the same one I used at Mary's wedding. I looked in the mirror and thought of Rose, of what she would say if she were here. I think she would be proud of Daniel, of his courage, of his decision not to let himself be trampled. I arrived at the venue 2 hours early. Jason was already there, setting up the giant screen at the altar. The staff thought it was part of the romantic decoration, to show photos of the couple Daniel had told them. The guests started to arrive. Vanessa's family, elegant and conceited, friends from both sides, colleagues of Daniel, people who had no idea what they were about to witness. I sat in the front row on the groom's side, alone. The place where Rose should have been was empty, but I felt her presence, as if telling me, "Calm down, Arthur. The truth always comes to light." And then the ceremony began. The music started playing, that wedding march that all weddings use. The guests stood up, the doors of the hall opened, and Vanessa appeared on Stephen's arm. She was wearing a spectacular white dress, probably extremely expensive, with jewels that shone with every step. The veil covered her face, but you could see her smile of satisfaction. Stephen walked with his chest puffed out, like a king delivering his princess. Daniel was standing in front of the altar, impeccable in his black suit. But I knew my son. I knew every gesture, every expression, and although to everyone else he looked like a nervous groom waiting for his bride, I saw the tension in his shoulders, the determination in his clenched jaw, his hands slightly closed into fists at the sides of his body. Vanessa reached the altar. Stephen handed her hand to Daniel with a pat on the shoulder that seemed to say, "Now she is your problem, boy." Then he went to sit next to Patricia, who gave me a look of sufficiency before smiling towards the altar. The priest began with the traditional words, welcome, reflection on marriage, the responsibilities, the commitment. Everything sounded beautiful. Everything seemed perfect. I looked at my watch discreetly. Jason was in the technical control booth at the back of the room, waiting for Daniel's signal. The giant screen they had installed behind the altar was off. The guests probably thought it was to show romantic photos after the ceremony. They did not know it was a guillotine waiting to fall. The priest reached the readings part. A cousin of Vanessa went up to read a passage about love. Then a friend of Daniel read another, all very emotional. Some people were already taking out tissues. Patricia cried delicately without ruining her makeup. Stephen maintained that smile of pride. The parents of the bride watching their daughter get exactly what they had planned. Finally, the moment of the vows arrived. The priest addressed Daniel first. "Daniel Miller, do you take Vanessa Sterling as your lawful wife, to love and respect her in sickness, and in health, in wealth, and in poverty? Until death do you part?" Daniel took a deep breath, looked at Vanessa, then looked at the priest and said something no one expected. "Father, before answering, there is something that everyone present needs to see." The priest blinked, confused. "Excuse me, there is information that must be revealed before continuing with this ceremony." Vanessa looked at him with alarm. "Daniel, what are you doing?" "The truth," replied my son with a firm voice. Then he signaled with his head towards the back of the room. The giant screen turned on. Murmurs ran through the room. People looked back towards the screen, confused, and then the playback began. First a title appeared in large letters, "The Truth About Vanessa Sterling and Her Family." Stephen stood up. "This is an outrage, turn that thing off." But it was too late. The first video began to play. It was a recording of the living room of the Sterling house. You could see Vanessa sitting with her parents. The quality was good, the audio was clear, and what they said was devastating. Vanessa's voice sounded through the speakers of the hall. "Almost there, Mom. Only 2 weeks left until the wedding. Afterward, I convinced Daniel to talk to his father. The old man is stupid. He will sign whatever his son asks him to." A collective gasp ran through the room. All eyes turned to the screen, then to Vanessa, then to me. I remained motionless as Daniel had asked me, although inside I felt a mixture of rage, pain, and satisfaction. The recording continued. Patricia asked, and if he does not sign? Then we use Plan B. Daniel already gave me access to his accounts. He has savings. Not much, but enough. And once we are married, everything is community property. I can move it however I want. Vanessa at the altar was pale. No, that is edited. It is a lie. But the video continued. Now, it was Stephen who was speaking. The ranch is the important thing. That land is right in the zone they are going to develop. The government already approved the highway. In 2 years, that land is going to be worth 10 times more. We need that ranch. I know Dad. That is why I married him. Do you think I liked going to that dirty town, pretending I liked his peasant father? But it will be worth it. The silence that followed was absolute. No one moved. No one breathed. They only looked at the screen with horror. Then the second video began. This one was more recent. From barely a week ago, Vanessa talking on the phone with someone. Yes, this nightmare is almost over. In a week, I marry this idiot, and we start working on getting the ranch from the old man. My dad already has interested buyers. We are going to make a fortune. A friend of Daniel's stood up from his seat. This is incredible. Vanessa, you are a... It is a lie, screamed Vanessa with tears running down her face. Daniel, tell them it is a lie. Someone manipulated those videos. But then a third video appeared. This was the most damaging one. It was from the night of the engagement dinner. Vanessa with her mother in the hotel bathroom. Touching up their makeup, Patricia said, Did you see how the father arrived? Smelling like a stable? How embarrassing, Vanessa laughed. I know. The stinking peasant has arrived. But relax, Mom. After the wedding, we will make sure Daniel distances himself from him. Put him in a nursing home or something. We do not need him close. That was the last straw. Several guests stood up indignant. An aunt of Daniel screamed, Scoundrels, snakes! Daniel's friends surrounded him at the altar as if protecting him, and on Vanessa's side, several guests began to stand up to leave scandalized. Stephen tried to turn off the screen himself, running towards the technical booth, but Jason had locked the door, and the presentation continued. Now documents appeared. Preliminary contracts that Stephen had signed to sell my ranch. Documents I did not even know existed. Agreements with real estate developers. Profit projections. Everything planned in detail. Everything based on getting my land through Daniel. The priest, completely overwhelmed, stepped down from the altar. I cannot continue with this. This is not a ceremony. It is a circus. Vanessa turned to Daniel with fury. You ruined me. You destroyed everything. No, replied Daniel with an icy calm. You ruined yourself. I only made sure everyone knew who you really are. But the wedding is paid for. There are contracts. Contracts can be broken. Marriages based on lies cannot. I preferred to expose you here in front of everyone than live a lie the rest of my life. Stephen had managed to force the door of the technical booth. Jason came out quickly, protecting himself. Stephen turned off the projector, but it was already too late. Everyone had seen enough. Patricia was hysterical. This is defamation. We are going to sue you. You are going to pay for this. But then something happened that no one expected. One of the guests on Vanessa's side stood up. He was a man of about 50, well-dressed with a serious face. Stephen, he said with a strong voice, I think you and I need to talk. I am Mr. Reynolds, the state prosecutor, and what I just saw constitutes attempted fraud, conspiracy to strip assets, and possible forgery of documents. My jaw dropped. I did not know there was a prosecutor among the guests. Daniel looked at me and smiled slightly. He did not know either. It was a guest on Vanessa's side, probably an acquaintance of the family. Stephen turned white. Mr. Reynolds, this is a misunderstanding. It is not a misunderstanding. These are recorded conversations, admitting fraudulent intentions. These are documents that show agreements to dispose of another person's property. I am going to need you, your wife and your daughter, to accompany me to give a statement. We are not going anywhere, screamed Patricia. Then I will have to call the police to escort you. The room was in total chaos. Some guests were filming everything with their phones. Others were running out. Daniel's friends surrounded us, forming a protective barrier. Vanessa's family was divided, some indignant, others ashamed, some even approaching Daniel to apologize. A cousin of Vanessa approached crying. "Daniel, I am so sorry. We knew nothing about this. My cousin was always ambitious, but I never thought she would go this far." An elderly uncle of Vanessa approached me. "Arthur, I offer you my most sincere apologies. This is a shame for our family." I just nodded, still processing everything that was happening. Mr. Reynolds took out his phone and called his colleagues. "I need a patrol car at the Imperial Events Hall. We have a case of attempted fraud that requires immediate investigation." Vanessa tried to flee. She literally lifted her wedding dress and ran towards the exit, but several guests blocked her way. Not with violence, just standing in front. "You are not going anywhere," said one of Daniel's friends. "You are going to face what you did." Vanessa collapsed on the floor, crying hysterically, her perfect makeup running down her face, her dress worth thousands of dollars. Dragging on the floor, her golden dream turned into a nightmare. Patricia tried to console her, but she was also crying, although her tears seemed more of rage than regret. Stephen was sitting on a chair with his head in his hands, his empire of lies crumbling before his eyes. 15 minutes later, the police arrived. 3 patrol cars' uniformed officers entered the hall with professionalism. Mr. Reynolds explained the situation to them. He showed them some of the videos on his own phone that he had recorded from the screen. "I need you to escort these 3 people to the prosecutor's office. We are going to open a formal investigation." Stephen stood up with fake dignity. "This is absurd. We did nothing illegal. Conspiring to defraud someone of their property is illegal, Stephen. Forging documents is illegal. And if what we saw in those videos is authentic, you have many charges to face. Those videos are edited. Then that will be determined in the investigation. But for now, I need you to accompany me." They took the 3 of them away, Vanessa still in her wedding dress, Patricia crying, Stephen trying to maintain composure but failing miserably. When they left the hall, escorted by police, some guests applauded. Others just looked with astonishment. It was like a movie, except it was real. Painfully real. When they finally left, the room was left in a strange silence. The priest had left a while ago, clearly overwhelmed. The venue staff did not know what to do. The food was prepared. The music was ready. But there was no wedding. Daniel came down from the altar and walked towards me. He hugged me tight. "I am sorry, Dad. I am sorry you had to go through this." "Do not apologize, son. You did the right thing. Do you really believe that?" "Completely. That woman and her family were going to destroy you. They were going to destroy us both. Better that it came to light now than later." One of Daniel's friends approached. "Brother, that was epic. Brutal, but epic," another added. "Vanessa and her family deserved it." How shameless. But I saw the pain in my son's eyes. He had loved that woman, or at least he had loved the idea of her, and discovering that everything was a lie, that she was only using him, had to hurt. Hurt a lot. "Do you want us to leave?" I asked him. Daniel looked around. The decorated hall, the prepared food, the guests that still remained now chatting in groups, processing what they had witnessed. "No," he said finally. "The food is paid for. The music is ready. Whoever wants to stay can stay. And we are going to celebrate." "Celebrate what?" "That I freed myself from the worst decision of my life. That my dad is safe. That the truth came to light." And so it was. In a strange, surreal way, that canceled wedding became a liberation party. Daniel's true friends stayed, some family members too. We ate, we drank. We even danced a little. I danced with my daughter Mary, who had arrived running when she heard what was happening. "Dad, are you okay?" "Now I am, honey. Now I am." But while we danced, I could not stop thinking about how close we had been to disaster. If Daniel had not discovered the truth, if he had not had the courage to expose it, we would have lost everything. The ranch my father left me, the the work of generations, everything. And the worst part, I would have lost my son. Because Vanessa would have distanced him from me. She would have manipulated him until he became someone I would not recognize. That night, when the party ended and everyone left, Daniel and I sat alone in the now empty hall. The lights were dimmed except for some decorative ones. The tables were messy. It looked like the scene after a battle. Son, how did you discover everything? Tell me from the beginning. Daniel took a deep breath. About a month ago, Vanessa started behaving differently, more interested in the ranch. She asked questions about how many acres you had, about if there were debts, about your will, and that did not seem strange to you? At first, no. I thought it was natural that she wanted to know about the family she was going to join, but then she became more insistent. She told me that we should convince you to put the ranch in my name, to protect it from taxes, she said, so there are no legal problems when you're older. And what did you tell her? No, that the ranch was yours, and that you would decide what to do with it when the time came. She got upset. She started insinuating that you were stubborn, that you did not understand the modern world, that I had to be firmer with you. Pure manipulation, yes, and that is when I started to suspect. Then one night we went to dinner at her parents' house. I arrived early. I knocked on the door, but no one answered. Although I heard voices inside, I pushed and it was open. I entered and heard Vanessa talking to her parents in the study. About us. About you. About their plans. And did you record? At that moment, no. I just listened, paralyzed. But later I came back with a small recorder and a hidden camera. For 3 weeks I gathered evidence, recordings, videos, documents that Stephen left on his desk. You risked a lot, son. I had to do it. Because every day that passed, Vanessa pressured more. She had already asked me for the passwords to my bank accounts. To organize the marriage finances, she said. And I, like an idiot, gave them to her. You trusted? I trusted the wrong person. We remained silent for a moment. And now what is next? I asked. Now comes the legal part. Mr. Reynolds contacted me. He wants me to present all the recordings formally. They are going to investigate the Sterlings for attempted fraud, and possibly for other charges if they find more irregularities. Do you think they will find more? Dad, people like that do not operate cleanly. If they tried to scam us, they probably have done the same to others. He was right, and the following days would prove exactly that. The days after the canceled wedding were a whirlwind of emotions, phone calls, and legal procedures that I never imagined I would have to face at my 63 years. Daniel and I met with Mr. Reynolds in his office at the prosecutor's building. It was a gray, bureaucratic building with long hallways that smelled of old paper and reheated coffee. But the lawyer's office was orderly, professional, with degrees on the walls that demonstrated years of experience. Arthur Daniel, he greeted us, shaking our hands firmly. Take a seat. We have a lot to talk about. We sat in front of his desk. Daniel brought a backpack with all the evidence, USB drives with the recordings, printed copies of documents he had photographed at the Sterling house, records of text messages where Vanessa asked him for information about my assets. The lawyer reviewed everything with meticulous care. He listened to the complete recordings, not just the fragments that had been shown at the wedding. He read every document. He took notes constantly on a legal pad. After almost 2 hours, he took off his glasses and looked at us seriously. This is solid, very solid. We have clear evidence of conspiracy to commit fraud. Vanessa and her parents openly discussed plans to strip Arthur of his property through deceit and manipulation. The documents Stephen prepared to sell the ranch without being the owner constitute forgery. And the unauthorized access to Daniel's bank accounts, even though he gave the passwords voluntarily, can be considered breach of trust with fraudulent intent. What does that mean in practical terms? I asked. It means we are going to file formal charges against the 3 of them. Vanessa Sterling, Stephen Sterling, and Patricia Sterling. The charges will include attempted fraud, conspiracy forgery of documents, and breach of trust. Depending on what we discover in the investigation, more charges could be added. How long can this take? Asked Daniel. The legal process can take months, but the preliminary investigation has already begun. My colleagues are reviewing the Sterling family's background, and we already found something interesting. He took a folder from his desk, opened it, and showed us several documents. Stephen Sterling has a history not of convictions, but of civil lawsuits. In the last 10 years, he has been sued 5 times by business partners, alleging fraud or breach of contract. 3 cases were settled with out-of-court agreements where he paid considerable sums. The other 2 were dismissed for lack of sufficient evidence. My stomach turned. And that does not appear in any public record? It appears if you know where to look, but most people do not investigate thoroughly. Besides, Stephen is skilled at projecting an image of success and respectability. He lives in an exclusive area, has social connections, donates to charities, all designed to seem legitimate. And Vanessa? Asked Daniel with a tense voice. Vanessa is younger. Obviously, she does not have such a long history. But we found something worrying. 3 years ago, she was briefly engaged to another man, a businessman from Chicago. The engagement was broken abruptly. We spoke discreetly with him. He told us that Vanessa's family had started asking questions about his properties and businesses. When he refused to give access to certain financial information, Vanessa ended the relationship. Daniel closed his eyes. It was her pattern. What they did to me, they had tried before. Exactly. And they probably would have kept trying with others, if you had not exposed them. Mr. Reynolds continued. Now there is something else I need to discuss with you. The Sterlings are being represented by very expensive lawyers. They already filed a countersuit alleging defamation, moral damage, and violation of privacy for the recordings. Can they do that? I asked, alarmed. They can try, but their case is weak. The recordings were made in spaces where Daniel had a right to be as a guest. They were not obtained through illegal espionage, and the content of the recordings is so incriminating that any reasonable judge will understand that Daniel was protecting himself and his father from an imminent fraud. So we have nothing to worry about? I did not say that. The Sterlings are going to fight. They are going to try to discredit us. They are going to hire investigators to look for anything they can use against us. That is why I need you to be absolutely honest with me. Is there anything in your past, in your finances, in your personal lives, that can be used to discredit you? Daniel and I looked at each other. I thought about my life. 63 years of honest work, taxes paid, no shady business, no dark secret. No, I said firmly. My life is an open book. The ranch is mine, inherited from my father with all the papers in order. I pay my taxes. I have no debts. I have not been involved in any scandal. And you, Daniel? Honest work, tax returns up to date. I have no enemies. Well, except the ones I just created by exposing the Sterlings. The lawyer nodded, satisfied. Good. That puts us in a strong position. Now, there is another topic. The wedding. Who paid for what? Vanessa's family paid for the venue. The food and the decoration, explained Daniel. I paid for the music, the invitations, and some other minor things. In total, I spent about $5,000. They spent easily $20,000. Did you sign any service contract? Yes. It is all in Stephen's name. He insisted on handling everything. Perfect. That means any financial loss from the cancellation is their problem, not yours. And they can hardly sue for that when they were exposed committing fraud. We left that meeting with a mixture of relief and apprehension. The legal process was just beginning, but at least we had a good lawyer and a solid case. The following days were strange. Daniel moved temporarily with me to the ranch. He needed distance from the city, from the places that reminded him of Vanessa. I was happy to have him close, although the circumstances were terrible. We worked together on the ranch like in the old days, plowing, sowing, repairing fences. Physical work did him good. It helped him process everything, and it reminded me why we were fighting. This land, this legacy, this was what the Sterlings had tried to steal from us. One afternoon, while we rested under the shade of a tree drinking fresh water, Daniel spoke. "Dad, do you think I'm a coward?" I looked at him surprised. "Why do you say that?" "Because I let Vanessa manipulate me. Because I gave her access to my accounts. Because I almost fell into her trap. You are not a coward son. You were a man who trusted, who loved. And when you discovered the truth, you had the courage to face it. Many men in your situation would have gone ahead with the wedding out of shame, to not admit they were wrong. You had the courage to cancel it publicly. It was humiliating. It was brave." He stayed silent for a moment. "Do you know what is the worst part? That part of me still misses her. Not the real Vanessa, but the one I thought she was. That is normal. You are grieving a relationship you thought was real, but was not. That kind of pain takes time to heal. How long did it take Mom to heal you when she died?" The question hit me in the chest. "Son, your mom died 6 years ago, and there are still days where it hurts, as if it were yesterday. But the pain becomes more manageable with time. You learn to live with it. I do not know if I want to trust someone again. You will want to, eventually. But this experience made you wiser, more careful. And that is not bad. 2 weeks after the canceled wedding, we received an official summons. The Sterlings had been formally accused. The preliminary hearing would be in a month. We would have to appear in court to ratify our statements and present the evidence formally. But before that, something unexpected happened. One morning, while Daniel and I were having breakfast on the ranch porch, an unknown car arrived. A black BMW, shiny, completely out of place on our dirt road. A man of about 45 got out, well-dressed with a briefcase. "Arthur Miller?" he asked, approaching. "Yes, that is me. Who is asking?" "I am Mark Vance. I represent the Sterling family." Daniel stood up immediately. "You have nothing to talk about with us? Please, just 5 minutes. I come with a proposal." I looked at Daniel. He shook his head. But my curiosity got the better of me. 5 minutes, I said. Mr. Vance sat on a plastic chair I offered him. He opened his briefcase and took out some documents. "My clients want to resolve this out of court. They are willing to pay a generous compensation if you drop the charges." "Compensation?" Daniel almost spat the word. "Do they think they can buy their way out of this? It is not about buying anything. It is about avoiding a long, expensive, and painful process for everyone. A public trial is going to destroy reputations on both sides. We have nothing to hide," I said firmly. "Maybe not, but a media trial is unpredictable. The Sterlings have resources to hire experts who can plant doubts about the authenticity of the recordings. They can allege that Daniel manipulated them because he wanted revenge for some reason. They can make everything become very complicated. The recordings are real," said Daniel with a hard voice. "I believe you, but a jury might not, if presented with enough technical counter-evidence. My work is to offer you a clean exit, $500,000 plus a public apology from the Sterling family, and we all go on with our lives. $500,000. It was a considerable amount. I could use that money to modernize the ranch to help Daniel rebuild his life. But I looked at my son. I saw the pain in his eyes. I saw the betrayal he still carried. And I knew that no amount of money was worth letting those people escape without consequences. "No," I said. "Arthur, be reasonable. I already said no. What they did is not fixed with money. They tried to rob us. They manipulated my son. They humiliated us. They would have continued doing the same to other people. This goes to trial." Lawyer Vance sighed. He put away his documents. "It is your decision, but I warn you, the Sterlings are going to fight with everything they have. This is going to get ugly." "Let it get ugly," said Daniel. "We are ready." The lawyer left, his BMW raising dust on the dirt road as he drove away. "Did we do good?" asked Daniel when the car disappeared. "We did the right thing." And as I said those words, I felt Rose's presence, as if she were there on the porch with us, nodding with approval. The following month was intensive preparation. Mr. Reynolds met with us several times to go over our testimonies. He brought forensic experts who verified the authenticity of the recordings. Each one was analyzed certified, backed with technical reports that demonstrated they had not been manipulated. They also investigated the Sterlings deeper, and what they found was devastating. Stephen not only had civil lawsuits, he had links to shell companies used to launder money of dubious origin. Nothing directly provable yet, but enough to expand the investigation. Patricia had debts, lots of debts, credit cards to the limit, unpaid personal loans. All that image of wealth was a facade. They lived beyond their means and needed money desperately. And Vanessa had lied on her resume. Several of the jobs she claimed to have had never existed. Some certifications were false. She was an imposter on multiple levels. "This is gold," said Mr. Reynolds when he showed us all the findings. "The prosecutor is going to present all this. The Sterlings not only face the original charges, now they are also being investigated for tax evasion and possible money laundering." "What does that mean for the case?" I asked them. "It means we are moving from a fraud case to a financial organized crime case. The potential sentences are much higher. We are talking about years in prison." Daniel showed no satisfaction. He just nodded, processing the information. I knew part of him still felt bad for Vanessa, not because she deserved it, but because he was not a vengeful person by nature. Finally, the day of the preliminary hearing arrived. We showed up at the courthouse early in the morning. It was an old but majestic building with stone columns and hallways full of people waiting for their own cases. The Sterlings arrived shortly after. Vanessa looked different without elaborate makeup, simple clothes, hair tied back as if she were trying to project humility, but her eyes were still hard. Stephen maintained his air of superiority, but the tension was noticeable. Patricia walked between them with dark glasses, even though we were inside. We looked at each other across the hall. No one said hello, only looks loaded with hostility. We entered the courtroom. The judge was an older man, about 70, with that air of someone who has seen everything in his long career. He sat down. He banged the gavel, and the hearing began. The prosecutor presented the case. He explained the charges. He showed fragments of the recordings. He presented the forged documents. He was meticulous, organized, convincing. The Sterlings' lawyers tried to object. They alleged that the recordings were inadmissible for having been obtained without consent. The judge listened to them and then denied the objection. The accused, Daniel Miller, was in a place where he had a legal right to be. He did not use illegal spy equipment, and the recorded conversations clearly demonstrate plans to commit a crime. The recording is admissible. The lawyers tried another angle. They alleged that everything was a misunderstanding, that the conversations were taken out of context, that there was no real criminal intent. The prosecutor responded by presenting the contracts Stephen had prepared to sell my ranch. Contracts with dates, forged signatures, profit projections. There was no way to interpret that as anything other than planned fraud. The judge reviewed everything carefully. Then he spoke. "There is enough evidence to proceed to trial. The defendants will face charges of conspiracy to commit fraud, forgery of documents, breach of trust, and pending further investigation. Possible charges related to tax evasion. Bail is set at $100,000 for each defendant. $100,000, $300,000 in total." It was a huge sum. Stephen turned pale. Patricia started to cry. Vanessa just looked at the floor. "Next hearing scheduled for 3 months from now," continued the judge. "Until then, the defendants are forbidden from contacting the victims or witnesses. Any violation will result in immediate arrest. Session adjourned." He banged the gavel. And so officially began the process that would determine the fate of the Sterlings. We left the courthouse feeling a mix of victory and exhaustion. It was just the beginning. The real trial would come later. But we had passed the first hurdle. In the parking lot while we walked towards my truck, a woman approached us. She must have been about 30, well-dressed with a face of determination. "Daniel Miller?" "Yes, that is me. My name is Fern. I read about your case in the news. and I need to talk to you because I was also a victim of the Sterling family." Daniel and I looked at each other surprised. "What?" asked Daniel. "2 years ago, I was briefly engaged to a cousin of Vanessa. The family did exactly the same thing to me that they tried to do to you. Questions about my family business pressure to give access to accounts, insinuations about inheritances. When I realized and ended the relationship, they threatened me. They told me if I spoke, they would destroy my reputation. Why did you not report it? Because I was afraid, and because I did not have proof like you have. But now that you expose them, I want to testify. I want them to pay for everything they have done." Mr. Reynolds, who had come out with us, approached, interested. "Miss Fern, I would like you to come to my office. Your testimony could be very valuable." And so the case against the Sterlings became even stronger, because Fern was not the only one who came forward. In the following weeks, 3 more people contacted the prosecutor, all with similar stories, all victims of the Sterling family schemes. It was a pattern, a modus operandi, and now it was completely exposed. The 3 months between the preliminary hearing and the real trial passed in a strange mix of normality and constant tension. Daniel continued living with me on the ranch. We had fallen into a comfortable routine, waking up at dawn, having breakfast together, working the land, eating what I cooked. I was never a great chef, but I manage, and in the afternoons reviewing legal documents or simply sitting on the porch watching the sunset. One afternoon, while we drank coffee after a particularly hard day repairing the irrigation system, Daniel spoke about something he had clearly been holding back. "Dad, I have been thinking about something. Tell me. When all this is over, I want to stay here, on the ranch, with you." I looked at him surprised. "Son, you have your life in the city. Your job, your friends. My work I can do from here. Most is remote consulting anyway. And my true friends, well, the ones that matter supported me through all this. The others are not worth it. Are you sure? I do not want you to take this decision because of what happened with Vanessa. It is not just because of that. These months here reminded me what really matters. The land, the family, honest work. In the city, I was living a life that was not mine, trying to impress people who were not worth it. I got a lump in my throat. Son, nothing would make me happier than having you here. But I want you to be sure. I am sure." And he was. I saw it in his eyes. My son had found his way back home. But before being able to enjoy that future, we had to finish with the present. And the present included a trial that promised to be brutal. The Sterlings' lawyers, led by an expensive legal team from New York, had been working hard to build their defense. According to what Mr. Reynolds informed us, their strategy was triple. First, discredit the recordings as manipulated or taken out of context. Second, paint Daniel as a vengeful man who fabricated everything because Vanessa had rejected him. And third, present the Sterling family as victims of an elaborate setup. "It is absurd," said Daniel when they explained the defensive strategy to us. "How can they argue that Vanessa rejected me when she was on her way to the altar?" "It does not have to make sense," explained Mr. Reynolds. "It just has to sow enough doubt in the minds of the jury. That is why our preparation has to be impeccable. We spent countless hours going over testimonies. The lawyer asked us difficult, uncomfortable questions, designed to prepare us for what the defense lawyers would try to do. It was exhausting but necessary. We also received more support than we expected. Fern, the first woman who had come forward as a previous victim of the Sterlings, became a sort of coordinator for the other victims. She had organized a group of 5 people in total, all willing to testify about similar schemes the Sterling family had tried with them. "This is important," Fern told us one afternoon when we all met in Mr. Reynolds' office. "It is not just about you or me. It is about stopping a pattern of abuse that has been operating for years." One of the other witnesses was a man about 50 named Robert. He had lost a complete family business after partnering with Stephen. "He convinced me that his experience in exports would make us grow," he explained with a trembling voice. "In 6 months, He had transferred most of the control of the business to shell companies he controlled. When I realized it was already too late, I lost everything. Another witness was an older woman, Mrs. Lucy, whose son had been engaged to a niece of Vanessa. They tried the same. Questions about our property, about lands we had. Thank God my son realized in time and ended the engagement. But they threatened us. They told us if we spoke bad about them, they would sue us for defamation. Each story was a dark reflection of what had happened to us, and each one strengthened our case. Finally, the day of the trial arrived. I put on my best suit, the same one I had used for the wedding that never was. Daniel looked impeccable, too. Mary and her husband came from Chicago to support us. Some friends from the ranch neighbors who knew us all our lives also showed up. The courtroom was full, there was press. The Sterlings had managed to generate some media attention, presenting themselves as a respectable family, being unfairly attacked. But we had the truth on our side. The Sterlings entered escorted by their legal team. Vanessa wore a conservative suit, glasses she did not need. Obviously to look more serious and a practiced victim expression, Stephen maintained his air of wounded dignity. Patricia was dressed in black, as if mourning her destroyed reputation. The judge entered a different man from the preliminary hearing. This one was younger, about 50, with a reputation for being strict but fair. We all stood up. He sat down. He banged the gavel. Session is open in the case of the state against Stephen Sterling, Patricia Sterling, and Vanessa Sterling. The charges are conspiracy to commit fraud, forgery of documents, breach of trust, and tax evasion. How did the defendants plead? The lead lawyer for the Sterlings, a man about 60 in a $3,000 suit, stood up. Innocent of all charges, Your Honor. Let the record show. Prosecutor, present your case. And so it began. The prosecutor was meticulous. He started explaining the context, how Daniel and Vanessa had met, the development of their relationship, the engagement, the wedding preparations, all narrated clearly, so the jury understood the complete story. Then he presented the recordings. Not all. That would have taken days. But the most incriminating ones. The room was in absolute silence while Vanessa's voice was heard saying, "The old man is stupid. He will sign whatever his son asks him to." I saw how some of the jurors frowned, how they took notes with renewed interest. When the recording arrived where Vanessa said, "Do you think I liked going to that dirty town, pretending I liked his peasant father?" I felt rage return to my chest, but I remained calm as I had been instructed. The prosecutor presented the forged documents, contracts, with my signature that I had never signed sales agreements for my ranch. I never authorized, all with notary seals that turned out to be fake when analyzed by experts. These documents, explained the prosecutor, were prepared by the defendant, Stephen Sterling, with the intention of selling a property that did not belong to him. He had already negotiated with potential buyers. He had already received down payments. All this before the true owner, Arthur Miller, even knew his property was being sold. The defense objected speculation. There is no proof that my client received money. There is proof, Your Honor, replied the prosecutor. He presented bank records the investigation had obtained with a court order, transfers of $10,000 from a development company to an account controlled by Stephen, dated 2 weeks before the wedding that never happened. Stephen turned pale. His lawyer whispered something urgently in his ear. The prosecutor continued. This was not a misunderstanding. It was not an error. It was a calculated fraud, planned for months, designed to strip an honest man of his assets. Then it was my turn to testify. They called me to the stand. I put my hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. The prosecutor asked me basic questions first. Who I was, my age, my occupation, the history of my ranch, all designed to humanize me before the jury, to show I was not just a name on legal documents, but a real person with a real life. Then he asked me about my relationship with Daniel, with Vanessa, with the Sterling family. I described our meetings, the red flags I had felt, but ignored my desire not to interfere in my son's happiness. Arthur asked the prosecutor, "When you heard Miss Sterling call you the stinking peasant, what did you feel?" "Shame," I admitted with a hoarse voice, "humiliation, but above all pain, because I realized that woman who was going to become my daughter-in-law despised me, and that my son had been about to tie himself for life to someone who hated me." "Did you ever authorize the sale of your ranch?" "Never. That ranch has been in my family for 3 generations. It is my legacy. I would never sell it, unless behind anyone's back." "Did you ever sign the documents presented where you apparently authorized the sale?" "Never. Those signatures are forgeries." The defense lawyer got up for the cross-examination. It was the moment I had been dreading. "Arthur," he began with a condescending tone, "you did not want your son to marry Miss Sterling, right? It was not my decision, but you did not like her. I had reservations, but I respected my son's decision. Or maybe you were jealous. Maybe you did not want to lose control over your son?" "Objection," said the prosecutor. "Speculation." "Sustained," replied the judge. The lawyer changed tactics. "Arthur, your ranch is in a zone that will be affected by new infrastructure development, correct?" "That is what I heard, which means it is worth much more now than a few years ago, I suppose. Is it not possible that you viewed your son's relationship as a threat to your assets? That you feared Daniel would inherit the ranch and then share it with his wife?" "No. I always planned to leave the ranch to my son with a wife or without her. But you wanted to control it, keep it under your name, under your power. I wanted to protect my family's legacy. There is a difference." The lawyer insisted for almost an hour, trying to paint me as a controlling, jealous, possibly senile father who had fabricated the whole scenario to avoid losing influence over his son. But I stood firm. I answered every question calmly, without losing my temper, without letting myself be provoked. When they finally let me down from the stand, I was exhausted, but I knew I had done well. Then Daniel testified. His interrogation was even harder. The defense lawyers tried to paint him as a resentful engineer who had planned everything as revenge because Vanessa supposedly had rejected him. "Is it not true, Mr. Miller, that Miss Sterling had expressed doubts about the marriage?" "No. There were no arguments between you. Normal arguments of any couple. Nothing indicating she wanted to end the relationship. And the recordings? Did you not edit them to say what you wanted them to say?" "No. They are complete recordings verified by forensic experts. Every word is real. Mr. Miller, is it not true that you have advanced technical knowledge in your field? I am an agricultural engineer, not an audio or video engineer." "But you have access to technology." Objection, intervened the prosecutor. "The lawyer is speculating without basis. The recordings were already certified by independent experts as authentic." "Sustained," said the judge with certain impatience. Daniel's interrogation lasted 2 hours, but he remained firm, consistent, clear in every answer. Then came the expert witnesses, audio forensics experts who explained how they verified the recordings, document experts who demonstrated the signatures on the contracts were forgeries, financial analysts who traced the money from potential buyers to Stephen's accounts. And then came the other victims. Fern was the first. She told her story with a trembling but firm voice, how a cousin of Vanessa had courted her, how the family had started asking invasive questions about her family business, how they realized the pattern and ended the relationship. When we broke the engagement testified, Fern Stephen called me personally. He threatened me. He told me if I spoke bad about his family, he would destroy my reputation and my business. "Do you have proof of that call?" asked the defense lawyer in a defiant tone. "I recorded it," replied Fern, and presented the audio. Stephen's voice was unmistakable. "Miss Fern, I suggest you keep your mouth shut about my family. I have resources and connections you cannot even imagine. I can make your life impossible." The judge asked for silence when murmurs ran through the room. The other witnesses followed each one with their story, each one adding another layer of evidence about the Sterling's pattern. of conduct. The defense tried to discredit them, suggested that they all coordinated to fabricate similar stories, but it was absurd. Some of these people did not even know each other before the case came to light publicly. Finally, it was the turn of the defendants to testify. Vanessa went up to the stand first. She was no longer wearing her fake glasses. Her victim composure had cracked. She looked tired, defeated. Her own lawyer asked gentle questions, trying to present her as a woman in love who had been misunderstood. But when the prosecutor interrogated her, everything crumbled. Miss Sterling, in the recordings you clearly say you were going to marry Daniel for his father's ranch. How do you explain that? I was joking. It was a private conversation with my parents. I was venting. Venting about what? About the pressure of marriage, of meeting expectations? And calling your fiancé's father a stinking peasant was also a joke? Vanessa turned red. I did not. That was taken out of context. What context makes it acceptable to refer like that to the father of the man with whom you were supposedly going to marry for love? I did love him. Did you love him? Or did you love his bank account and his father's ranch? Objection, shouted the defense lawyer. Argumentative. I withdraw the question, said the prosecutor. But the damage was done. Stephen testified next. He was arrogant, defensive, clearly annoyed at having to be there. The prosecutor destroyed him, showing the bank transfers, the forged contracts, the recorded threats. Stephen, do you deny having prepared documents to sell a property that did not belong to you? Those documents were preliminary exploratory. Exploratory? Even when they included your forged signature and the name of Arthur Miller? I did not forge anything. Then who did? I do not know. Maybe they were altered later. By whom? I do not know. Maybe by Daniel himself to frame me. It was ridiculous and showed on the faces of the jury that they did not believe a word. Patricia almost could not testify. She broke down on the stand, crying, claiming stress and health problems. The judge was patient, but firm. She admitted having participated in the recorded conversations, but insisted everything had been misinterpreted. The trial lasted 2 full weeks. 2 weeks of testimonies, evidence, arguments. In the end, both sides presented their closing arguments. The prosecutor was forceful. Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the evidence is clear and irrefutable. The defendants planned, executed, and were about to complete an elaborate fraud designed to strip an honest family of their assets. The recordings are authentic. The forged documents are real. The testimonies of multiple victims establish a pattern of criminal conduct. Justice demands that the defendants face the consequences of their actions. The defense argued reasonable doubt, errors of interpretation, personal revenge, but it sounded empty even to them. The judge announced he would deliberate and give his verdict in a week. That week was the longest of my life. Daniel and I tried to keep busy on the ranch, but it was impossible not to think constantly about what would come. Finally, the day arrived. The room was full again. The Sterlings looked defeated before it even started. The judge entered. We stood up. He sat down and began to read. In the case of the state against Stephen Sterling, Patricia Sterling, and Vanessa Sterling, this court has reviewed all evidence presented. The recordings authenticated by forensic experts demonstrate clearly intention to commit fraud. The forged documents verified by experts constitute the crime of forgery. The testimonies of multiple victims establish a pattern of criminal conduct. He paused. The silence was absolute. This court finds Stephen Sterling guilty of all charges: conspiracy to commit fraud, forgery of documents, breach of trust threats, and tax evasion. The sentence is 12 years in prison. Stephen collapsed in his chair. Patricia Sterling is found guilty of complicity in fraud and tax evasion. The sentence is 8 years in prison. Patricia sobbed audibly. Vanessa Sterling is found guilty of fraud, breach of trust, and complicity in forgery. The sentence is 10 years in prison. Vanessa did not react. She only looked into the void. Additionally, continued the judge payment of damages to the victims is ordered. Investigation of all properties and accounts of the defendants is ordered to determine the full extent of their fraudulent activities, and economic compensation to Arthur Miller and Daniel Miller for moral damages caused is ordered. He banged the gavel. Session adjourned, and so it ended. Daniel hugged me. Mary cried with relief. Our friends congratulated us. Mr. Reynolds smiled satisfied. We had won. We left the courthouse under the bright sun. I felt like I could breathe for the first time in months. The weight had been lifted. Dad said, "Daniel, how do you feel?" Tired, I admitted, but at peace. That night back at the ranch, Mary, her husband Daniel, and I had dinner together. We toasted, told stories, laughed. It was the first truly happy dinner we had in a long time. When everyone went to sleep, I stayed alone on the porch, looking at the stars, and spoke to Rose like I did sometimes. We did it, my love. We protected our son. We protected the ranch. We protected everything we built together. I felt the soft wind on my face, and I chose to believe it was her telling me she was proud. The following years were quiet good. Daniel stayed on the ranch as he had promised. We modernized operations, implemented sustainable techniques he had learned. The ranch prospered. Daniel eventually met someone else, a good woman, a rural teacher without pretensions who loved him for who he was. They got married in a small ceremony here on the ranch, and this time everything was real. The Sterlings served their sentences. Stephen died in prison of a heart attack. Patricia got out after 6 years for good behavior, old and broken. Vanessa served 8 full years. When she got out, she moved to another state. We never heard from her again. The other victims also found justice, and some, like Fern, became family friends. Today, at my 69 years, I look back and I see that that nightmare made us stronger. It taught us that the truth always finds its way. That true family protects itself. That honest work is worth more than any ill-gotten wealth. And I tell anyone listening to this story, if something does not feel right, it probably isn't. Trust your instinct. Protect what is yours. And never, never be afraid to defend the truth. Because in the end, the truth always prevails. And true love, genuine respect, and honest dignity are worth more than all the gold in the world.